There was an unsettling atmosphere in the air as the battle to decide the fate of the planet progressed into unknown territory. On a front line stretching 300 kilometers long, the Grand Army under the banner of Cathan von Kleos, the half-brother of the current planetary governor, was rolling down from the north after weeks of preparation, hoping for a decisive engagement. With Cathan's forces moving towards the capital city of Nusquam, to retreat would mean ceding several key planetary infrastructures to the rebel forces, losing both prestige and any advantage held. Strategically, Cartolina could not avoid this battle. Cathan's mother was from the northern part of the planet, belonging to the more hardy bunch of the populace whose military tradition went further back than their southern counterparts. This was reflected in the military divisions on the planet itself. The North had long since prided itself on the fact that most elite and celebrated battalions were from their side. Due to that, while the armies facing off against each other was comparable in strength on paper, Cathan's faction was confident in the final outcome of this matchup. The Grand Northern Army was made up of roughly 4,000 battle tanks and 10,000 combat vehicles separated into 3 battle groups. The bulk of the army was in the center group with 2 other smaller groups on each side to prevent flanking maneuvers. Choose wisely when the opportunity to return to the right path presents itself. The Emperor protects. The speaker blared with a gentle female voice repeating the same message again and again inside the confined compartment of a Taurox armor transport. What the frack is that? Trooper Matthias asked. Like hell I know, maybe it is your mother talking on the speaker? Comm Specialist Lantos replied. I will be damned, you can actually compliment. If his mother sounded that beautiful, I would not mind meeting her one bit, teased Trooper Silas. Shut the hell up all of you, sounds like all the long-range Vox channels have been taken over. Anybody still wants to do your last Vox right, do it now, I am cutting off that privilege after 1 minute. Barked Sergeant Jahat as he supervised Lantos working on the communicator, but regardless of his efforts the same message was repeating on the Vox speaker and it was beginning to unnerve them. Losing out on Vox War on our big day? A bad omen if you asked me, but at least they had the decency to pick a speaker with a beautiful voice. Another trooper added his voice. I don't know about you guys, but this war ain't feeling right for me from the get-go, shipped in a low voice. It was from Ignathem, the quiet but capable person in the squad who seldom spoke, but when he did, people listened. What do you mean, Ignathem? Silas asked. That got everyone's attention. Ignathem eyed his squadmates for a while before talking. That day, I saw it, on one of the fights when they attacked, they had sororitas with them. Trooper Ignathem. Sergeant Jahat gave his warning but it was too late. Is that true, Sarge? The sororitas are with the governor? So that is not a rumor? That message even got the Inquisition involved now. No one in their right mind would mention the Inquisition if it ain't real. Lately, there was a rumor going around that the initially neutral sororitas had shown up alongside the forces of the incumbent governor in the civil conflict. Nusquam was a civilized imperial world that held the seat of the planetary governor as the highest office and other branches of the Imperium as ruling subsidiaries. As such, the fact that a whole order minoris was here despite the world not being under the direct control of the ecclesiarchy was a rarity indeed. Even so, like the rest of the Imperium, members of Adepta Sororitas were widely viewed as symbols of piousness on Nusquam. The order held enough sway on the public's opinion and their recent support towards Cartolina had been largely downplayed by Cathan's faction. But this suppression could not keep going on for long, which was part of the reasons they had pushed for a swift conclusion. Once Cathan held the office there was little the sororitas could do as against the host of the planet but to file protests, but such actions might as well be spitting at the sea. For the common soldiers on the planet though, the sororitas enjoyed an idol-like status with their reputation of being well-trained for combat, zealous ferocity in battle and access to usage of iconic war gear like power armor and bolters. That was why a blanket gag order was in place forbidding the common troopers from discussing the matter in an attempt to prevent it from eroding the troops' morale. Specialist Lantos, turn the communicator off if you can't switch around that message. The rest of you shut it. Or I will be forced to. Sergeant Jahat was dropping another warning when the Taurox transport suddenly came to a halt. Losing his balance, Jahat toppled to the side. A loud thud was heard as he banged his head on the inside of the truck with his prized Cadian pattern helmet. Thrown, damn it. Driver, what the hell are you doing? The sudden stop had made the big man divert his wrath, while the rest of the squad kept their silence, as they knew better than to be on the bad side of the sergeant when he got really pissed. "Sorry sir, but the indomitable Fury has suddenly stopped moving," the driver replied. That got the rest of the squad to check on the leading Baneblade super heavy tank from their visual slit. "Yeah, she has stopped moving, Sarge." "What the?" Suddenly there was a loud thud on the roof of the Taurox and an explosion of sorts happened. Everyone flinched at the sound and someone cried out, "We are being shelled." The whole squad panicked and expected massive explosions to follow, but none came. In the eerie silence inside the compartment, a constant popping sound could be heard outside of their transport, while the same message asking them to choose wisely was repeating itself. "The Emperor protects. The Emperor protects," Jahat muttered to himself with a shaken voice for a while before finally turning to his subordinate to vent his frustration. "Specialist Lantos, didn't I order you to turn that thing off?" "I did turn it off, Sarge," Lantos replied meekly while adjusting his spectacles with a trembling hand. "Sarge, you need to take a look at this." Ignathan's calm voice had everyone's attention. Jahat took a look at what the trooper was indicating and he gasped. "What in the name of?" the sergeant said while opening the rear hatch of the vehicle. Outside the vehicle, everything on the ground level was covered with a layer of white smoke. Above them, some unknown flyers flying in formations could be seen. "Sarge, I am afraid to ask, but have we been bamboozled? This does not look like an easy victory for me," Salah asked. "Where are our flyers? Why does it look like they have total air superiority over us?" Over their head up in the sky, a few flyers could be spotted flying, and the same message they had heard repeatedly inside their vehicle could be heard reverberating across the field. "Are those the Nuntius Hailers? Those things only ever came out during special big church events. So we are really going up against the Sisters and the Inquisition? This is madness." Meanwhile, inside the leading Baneblade Indomitable Fury, Lord General Luther von Norden, Supreme Field Commander of the Northern Grand Army, was hit by a grim realization something was really amiss with the development of this battle. First off, communications between his army with the rear elements was suddenly lost. No one from his battle group could make contact with the headquarters nor rearguard General Borin. Then their long-range Vox network seemed to be hijacked, broadcasting the same repeating message asking them to surrender. Their enemy had even bothered to send Lord Hailer flyers to bombard them with the same message, signaling their loss of air superiority. Just moments ago they were shelled by artillery rounds. Thankfully those were just smokescreen shells, but the shelling was so accurate he had a distinct feeling they were being taunted. With the realization that the whole army could be moving into a trap, he ordered the battle group to a grinding halt. Sure enough, after his battle formation halted their movement, forward observers reported the path in front was hit by the next wave of smoke bombardment, rendering everything in a blanket of white smoke and confirming his hunch that their default route had been anticipated. Have we been totally outmaneuvered? Luther could not fathom such a thing happening at this very moment. Cartolina's side had never displayed such expertise, and Cathan's camp had had the upper hand on almost every engagement until now. Lord General, his right-hand man, a junior officer, approached him gingerly, breaking his thought process. "Someone is on the line and wishes to talk to you." "Who?" "She claims to be a daughter of the Emperor, currently representing the combined will of Adeptus Sororitas, Adeptus Mechonicus and the Holy Inquisition in supporting Lady Cartolina." "Talk, huh?" The Lord General's eyes narrowed. "That means they do not possess enough leverage to deal with all of us yet and wish to buy time. Have you all worked out where the smoke shells originated from yet?" "My lord, from the evidence so far, we believe the shells originated from our backline." "So, General Borin has betrayed us, or somehow Cartolina's forces actually took over his command. At any rate, they could not have sent more than an elite strike force to do the job." "I agreed on that assessment, Lord." "Your orders?" "Send Colonel Arnold's 144th Mobile Infantry Division to find out what is happening back there. Make sure we take back control of our artillery battalions. If found to be at fault, General Borin does not have to survive." "Affirmative." "Something fishy is happening. Without stable back-end support, dragging this engagement will be a great disadvantage to us. Prepare to move the whole battle group forward. We are diverting from the original plan and going straight in." In the meantime, let me talk to whoever this person is. I turned off the communication line and let out an inward sigh. It was too optimistic to think we could have resolved all this without further bloodshed. So the talks broke down, and it seemed like we would be doing this the hard way. Lord General Luther von Norden was not intimidated by us dropping smoke screens on his forces one bit. The general had also refused my request for holographic communication, thus my halo trick was denied and we negotiated via voice only. As a result, I did not have much to work with on him. From his profile I could see the man was a fierce-looking, hawkish individual who had spent his entire adult life in the military, climbing his way through the ranks with a combination of competency and a tireless work ethic. Background-wise, he came from a family with deep ties to the established noble houses of the planet and was a distant uncle to Cathan, Cartalina's half-brother. Luther was proving harder to deal with than I expected, but then again I knew for the Lord General, this war was more than a civil dispute, it was personal. From the information we dug out on him, it was widely known decades earlier Luther had lost his beloved and only son in what was a messy love affair that had involved Cartalina. The general had hidden that grudge well, but apparently, it had secretly manifested into his life's mission to bring the governor down. Now that he had the one and only chance to see it into fruition, no amount of reasoning could sway his resolve. Even the fact that Cathan von Cleus had retreated from the theatre of war did not seem to bother him much. It might even have the opposite effect, since that meant Luther literally answered to no one but himself on this battlefield, with close to 500,000 troops and a lot of battle tanks under his command. From the brief talk, I had the impression he was convinced either our actions were some form of trickery or we did not really have the means to stop his forces. At this point, nothing short of the Emperor himself in his full glory with a whole great crusade fleet appearing in the sky will change his current course of action. This stubborn old geezer is going to get a lot of people killed. The same rigid military structure that had enabled us to take over the rear line of the rebel forces now prevented us from convincing the bulk of the main force to surrender. Shivering slightly from the accumulated strain of ceaselessly using my ability to manage the operation, I gathered my strength before resolving myself for the inevitable big battle that would result in mass casualties for the rebels. But better the rebels die than dragging the safety of me and my associates together with the future of this planet down the drain. I'm sorry a lot of you guys will have to die a wasteful death. Crypto, you heard what he said. I sent. Affirmative. The calculus did put the odds of convincing him to surrender at less than 10%. The general's response is within the predicted perimeters, as logic and loyalty are no longer his primary operational motive. Are you happy you can test your toys now? Emotional gratification unnecessary, data collection and live test of the experimental approach to warfare is the priority. Usage of the term toys is incorrect for the hardware involved. The Dominus answered without skipping a beat. So is everything ready for the battle? Affirmative. Hold on, I am receiving a vox from Inquisitor Thorn. It appears to be urgent, patching him in. A system chime sounded, signaling Thaberus participation. Dominus. Has the engagement with the rebel main army started yet? Can you get Sirin in here too? The Inquisitor's voice barged into our virtual communication. Something about the way he sounded made me realize this could be serious. I am here, Inquisitor. We are just about to make contact with the rebel main force. What is the urgent news? Sirin? Good. You must listen to what I am about to say carefully. We have just uncovered important leads to the Chaos Cult working behind the scene. I believe they are planning to use a blasphemous ritual together with an ancient artifact to summon powerful warp entities over. Oh, this is serious, seriously bad. Chaos cultists cooking up long-term schemes to bring down worlds is totally a thing in this universe. I was so busy preparing for the war I had totally overlooked the very reason Thaberus was on this planet, chasing insidious chaos cults. To my understanding, this particular ritual utilizes the recently departing souls who had died of violent deaths to fuel its potency. In short, everyone on the planet involved in this civil war is but a sacrificial pawn in their scheme. If possible, do not engage the rebel army until this is resolved. Stunned by the news, I took another look at the tactical overview and watched in horror as the Grand Rebel Army started moving again. This time they were going straight to our defensive line. An emergency virtual meeting was held just before the biggest engagement with the rebel army happened. Holographic busts of all the important people were arranged in a circle as the urgent discussion went down on virtual space. Chaos cultists? And a blasphemous ritual utilizing departing souls as fuel to open up a warp portal and summon demons on my planet. Cartolina voiced her disbelief. The level of shock she experienced shattered the joy she had experienced earlier today. The ritual site appears to have quite a formidable defense with void shield generators. Orbital bombardment won't work. Inquisitor Thorn had tapped into the rapid response force we had reserved for the renegade Astartes to deal with the cultists. He and his team are heading towards the site as we speak. But the target destination is quite a distance away. It will take 1.5 standard Terran hours just for the strike force to reach there. Cryptoro notified. So, this was why my lady was pushing for a peaceful resolution. Your boundless foresight and wisdom astounds us, praised Canonis Diadonar with a bow, and the rest of the Palatines followed suit. But I was feeling unwell and we had no time for these Sasuga shenanigans, so I quickly and lightly brushed off the compliments and brought the topic back to its course. We are but moments away from engaging the main rebel army, and as outrageous as it sounds, our main priority now is to scale down the potential casualties for both sides before the ritual is dealt with. Fortunately, I had brainstormed with Dominus Cycle before on such matters and we had come up with some solutions to minimize casualties on both sides. I summarized. I will have to respectfully disagree on that statement. Surprisingly, Cryptora refuted me and he continued, almost all of these solutions were solely pushed by you in one of our much earlier discussions. I take no credit for such extreme approaches to non-lethal resolutions. Bless the Omnissiah, these could now be applied to our current situation, largely thanks to your foresight. His words brought me another round of applause from the sisters. Even some of the new squimmies were joining in, making the meeting even more awkward for me. I did come up with some outrageous ideas in my naive attempt to save lives in our previous discussions, never expecting them to be implemented for real. Cryptora continued, at any rate, I had taken the liberty of putting down some of those ideas into executable formations and engagement protocols just in case we have use of it, like now. Fortunately, our forces are already in place and ready, we just have to change the method of engagement. With cooperation from you all, we could in theory massively cut down casualties until the heretical ritual is dealt with. The Dominus then started distributing the detailed information of his plan, again doing the real work here. Very well, let's do this, I declared, and the emergency virtual meeting concluded in high spirits. Soon after the meeting, right in the afternoon, the Grand Northern Army finally made contact with our forces. Banking on their advantage of dictating the engagement and having better trained battle tank companies, the rebels tried to push through the defensive line by concentrating their forces in one spot. Responding to this, we sprang our trap. First, we bombarded the whole area with smokescreen shells from our artillery units, rendering visibility on the field close to nothing for a while, slowing their progress to a crawl. Cryptora then started to conduct his massive experimental warfare on the rebels, taking full advantage of our total air superiority. He deployed thousands of experimental probes from the air and had them swarmed over the rebels' tank formation. Utilizing sophisticated Auspex readings, he was able to pinpoint the position of each and every tank in the rebels' formation and started detonating probes on their tracks, immobilizing half of the spearhead tanks and leaving the rest in an awkward position on whether to press forward or leave their compatriots behind. Next, he proceeded on doing the same with all the outlying vehicles of the battle formation, effectively attempting to trap the whole army with their own immobilized vehicles. Finally, a portion of his probe swarm was dedicated to taking out the mobile artillery and the rebel army to deny them their indirect fire capabilities. The small number of mobile artillery tanks in the rebel army group, be it Basilisk, Colossus, Griffin, Manticore, Medusa or Wyvern tanks, were all hunted down and had their primary weapon disabled by a suicidal probe detonating at a critical point. A few unfortunate incidents did occur as some of the artillery tanks were obliterated outright when a probe was detonated too close to their ammunition. I winced internally every time one of these rare cases occurred. Alarmed by this unforeseen development, the rebels tried their best to shoot down the probes. Soon traces of small arms fire were observed from their formation as they tried their best to bring the probes down. Good luck with that with all the smoke and the chaotic situation, and that was before taking the agility of the probes into account. Cryptora then took advantage of the chaos to sneak in his sophisticated spy probes and attached them to the turrets of the leading Baneblade super heavy tanks. With my authority ability, we easily bypassed their security protocols and managed to covertly tap into all their communications. When the frontmost elements of the rebel tank formations finally met with the defenders, more troubles awaited them. Knowing exactly where they would strike, we had placed Catalina's most capable tank hunter units in entrenched positions to meet their assault head-on. Units of Mechonicus Onigidani crawlers armed with neutron lasers were present at key areas to provide accurate fire support, immobilizing tank after tank with their pinpoint accuracy. In this clash, we would make a point of immobilizing and destroying the primary weapons of the first few rows of enemy tanks with precision fire from our units and suicide probes, creating a barrier of lame duck units at the forefront of the rebel armor spearhead to further bite time. A makeshift system had been set up, enabling Cryptora to share targeting data acquired from the Mechonicus sophisticated sensors with all friendly units. Such features enabled the governor's forces to operate optimally even under the heavy cover of smoke screens, firing anti-tank rounds at the maximum distance to disable more rebel tanks. With me keeping tabs of their command chatter and providing a God's point of view over the entire battlefield to direct resources, we were able to outgun the rebels despite the majority of our forces being less capable in actual combat performance, putting up a fierce fight against the rebels' armor advances with all our stacked-up advantages. Meanwhile, the rebels struggled to bring their superior tank numbers and gunnery to bear, working in very difficult conditions of low visibility due to smoke screens and suffering from constant communication errors thanks to me messing with their short-range Vox spy probes scattered in the field. Soon the rebels' armor assaults were hindered by an ever-increasing number of immobilized and disabled vehicles. Any hostile vehicle that could break through our lines of fire would be visited by one of Cryptora's suicide probes and had its track blown off, halting any tangible progress. Then to top it all off, in the chaotic mess Cryptora exploited our total air superiority again to drop a massive EMP bomb on the rebels' battle formation, carefully calculating the area of effect so the electromagnetic pulse would mostly hit hostile units. Contrary to what a typical sci-fi movie would have you believe, most military hardware was shielded against such an attack, but the Dominus was aiming to cripple their targeting systems and add further woes to their already dire situation. According to the very first plan Cryptora had suggested, this would be the point where we dropped all the artillery rounds to finish the stranded rebels off, but we were not helping that dark ritual today. The glorious combat Lord General Luther was hoping for had become a quagmire of impossible scenarios. All these actions so far provided the perfect cover for the bulk of Catalina's reserve forces to quietly deploy further outside of the combat area. Exploiting our total control over the information the rebels were receiving on the battlefield, we were able to slowly encircle Luther's army without him noticing. After about an hour or so of non-stop grueling tank battle where we were busy disabling hostile tanks while the other side was basically shooting blind, the rebels finally caught on that they were in a hopeless tar-pit situation. Anticipating they would be making their next move soon, I had my attention focused on the inside of the leading Baneblade Indomitable Fury. Despite the overall environment being noisy as heck as the inside of a tank operating on a battlefield should be, with all the sensors available and my superhuman hearing, I still managed to make out what was being said. "My lord, the latest reports are in," someone said inside the tank. "Let me see." A voice I recognized to be Luther replied. There were hints of frustration in his tone. A while later, the Lord General spoke again. "What in the Emperor's name? This casualty number is no mistake?" "Yes, my lord. I double-checked it myself. We have fully engaged the enemy on the front, and you meant to tell me until now we have a lot more immobilized vehicles than casualties?" "Confirmed. It seemed to be a deliberate act of the enemy." "So, what are they playing at? Are we being toyed with?" There was a brief moment of uncomfortable silence before he continued with a snarl. "Unacceptable. Relay my new order. Send in the forward infantry divisions for a frontal assault. The enemy should be overcompensating for anti-armor warfare. We will see if they can continue to toy with us." "Yes, Lord." It was then I backed off from eavesdropping and warned the commanders of our side on the impending infantry waves. Thus the rebels switched from armored to massed infantry assault, sending waves of infantry battle formations through their immobilized vehicles to charge our defensive lines. Anticipating that, what awaited their infantry charge was an unconventional formation of sororitas in the front with massed Scutari Rangers behind. Under the supervision of their Canonis and Palatines, the Battle Sisters were ordered not to return fire unless they were absolutely sure their shots would not kill the rebels. Before long the rebel infantry formation reached our line like the waves of a human tsunami. It was then Cryptura invoked the Mechonicus Protector Doctrina imperative protocol for his entire army, affecting all the Scutari troops on the field via enhanced data tethers that were scattered across his units. The protocol temporarily buffed all the Scutari units to enhance their already deadly marksmanship. The Rangers were soon putting their extreme gunnery skills to use, but were ordered to take only non-lethal shots. Thus another really weird battle went underway. Already outranging the standard las guns by a huge margin and equipped with advanced optics, the Rangers went to work, subjecting the rebel troops with pinpoint-accurate small arms fire before they even had the chance to shoot back. Each time a Ranger would fire his or her galvanic rifle, a rebel trooper would either lose a weapon or suffer a non-lethal wound to the leg or arm. The downed troopers would then be ignored and soon a huge number of wounded or unarmed troops were reported on the front, straining resources and morale for the rebels. Those making further progress charging into the defensive lines would be met by a line of Battle Sisters who would not shoot back. Fighting the sororitas alone was already quite a hard sell for most of the rebel troopers, adding to the fact that the sisters were not shooting back brought a whole new level of eeriness. Most were unnerved and refused to engage the sororitas. For those who pushed on to engage, the Battle Sisters' power armor and entrenched position made a mockery of their desperate efforts. Some had reported having been shot at by the sisters. However, the bolter rounds always just exploded inches from their feet, cementing the notion they were only firing warning shots but could kill them any time if the sisters wished. While these odd standoffs were happening, the Scutari Rangers at the backline never stopped on their assigned task, picking off weapons and delivering non-lethal blows with typical Mechonicus cold machine-like efficiency. Overhead the Nuncius Hailers continued their flyovers broadcasting messages asking the rebels to surrender. Such displays of dominance were soon having a catastrophic effect on the morale of the rebels who were saddled with an increasing number of weaponless and wounded soldiers, resulting in mass surrenders in certain areas. These surrendering troops would be handled by the governor's regular units who were stationed behind the Scutari, freeing the more elite sisters and rangers from the burden of such operations while the process was being repeated and recorded. The recorded picked feed were then displayed on the Nuncius Imagifier flyers for their flyovers, resulting in another chain reaction of surrendering across the front line. In the midst of the oddly one-sided firefight, a squad of really dedicated rebels successfully forced their way into a line of Battle Sisters, only to be bested by the sisters in the ensuing hand-to-hand combat, swiftly being pummeled by power armor fists and awarded with black eyes and broken noses. After that, they were then unceremoniously dragged out of the combat zone to become prisoners of war. Soon the battlefield became flooded with vox from the rebel side calling for medical aid and support. I was closely monitoring everything through all the data feeds, reacting to the action of the rebels and swiftly issuing general orders to the relevant on-field commanders while keeping tabs on the information coming out from the indomitable fury. This continued for a while until Lord General Luther von Norden's frustration reached a feverish point. Soon he had called for a Vox meeting with all his generals to decide on the next course of action. Wham! The sound of a bare fist hitting a flat surface came inside the Baneblade after an overview report was delivered. It was followed by Luther cursing out loud, by the Emperor's teeth. My lord, the rate of our men being either wounded or disarmed is worrying. This is unsustainable. The fact that most of our troops who had made contact with the enemy were left alive has severely strained our resources and morale. We are getting requests on orders with what to do with whole battalions of wounded men. Luther breathed heavily for a while before finally answering, "It is fine, we have reserves. What about the key objectives? Any progress?" The weakest points of the enemy defenses had been identified. Finally, some good news. How is the reorganization of our operational vehicles coming along? On that front, we will be ready soon. Of all the immobilized units, a small portion were managed to be repaired on the field. Good. Give the orders, we will be moving out soon. My lord, what about the wounded? Leave the wounded behind to continue the standoff on the stranded sectors. We are making an all-out attack with everything, that includes the left and right flank groups. We will all be pushing at the least guarded part of the enemy line. This ends now. One of the generals communicating on their Vox network wanted to voice his opinion. My lord, should say no more. The Lord General sharply rebuked before his subordinate could finish his statement. It is decided. This time I will lead with the indomitable fury at the front. The left and right flank groups will join with the same example. The intensity of his voice made me wince, and suddenly I found myself grabbing the podium to stabilize myself as another wave of dizziness hit me again. Behind me came the surprised gasps of Wellmann and Verita. My condition had deteriorated until the point I could no longer hide my weakened state from them. My strength and focus were rapidly slipping away. Meanwhile, the mad general was hell-bent on sending his entire army on a desperate mission for personal vendetta and would be starting his suicide run soon.